Rise and shine!
It's espresso time!
Hey, it's Carmichael, and successful people don't wake up and go, yes, what another day to be alive! But when you have a morning routine that sets you up for success, like watching one of these videos, it will change your life. So let's start your day off right together. Grab your coffee, know that I believe in you, and get ready for a shot of espresso from Bill Gates.
I wake up every morning.
Espresso keep me going.
I wake up every morning.
In my 20s, I didn't get to read much at all.
Yeah.
And so like all this stuff was going on in biology and math. I just didn't get to read it. Then when I did get into my 30s, those vacations were a time to go back because when I was a student, you could study all sorts of things. Now, I read a lot of science, and that uses up, maybe half of the slots that I have. Really understanding U.S. poverty and what's going on there. There's a few dozen books that try and give you a glimpse of that are very good. This book, Factfulness, let me say, it definitely creates a framing for what's going on in the world. And the other one that's right up there is any Pinker book, starting with Better Angels of Our Nature.
Books give you access to mentors who you would never have access to. If you are struggling thinking, I don't have connections, I don't know anybody who's had success, I don't have any good mentors, everybody talks about mentorship and how important it is, and I don't have anybody in my life to help me. Books could be that for you. Books can be an accumulation of sometimes decades of knowledge, all condensed down into 200, 300, 400 pages that you get a window into somebody else's life. And so whatever you don't know yet, whatever you want to learn, chances are it's in a book. It's in videos as well. I love YouTube, but it can be in books. There's no excuse, not anymore, for you not to get access to the information and be around the people that can take you to where you want to go. I'm a big believer that you're a product of your environment. Think about who you're hanging out with, where you are right now, where you spend your time, what information are you feeding into your brain. The fact that you're here watching this video is already a step up, is already showcasing that you are an achiever and that you want more out of life, that you don't want to stay where you are, that you don't want to be in the same spot. Think about 1 year from today. You don't want to still be where you are right now, right? You want growth, you want progress, you want impact, you want to touch people's lives. That's why you're here. It just needs to be more consistent. It just needs to be more thorough. There's a expression of the fastest way to learn a language is to go to the country. The fastest way to learn Japanese is to go to Japan. And if you can't actually go to Japan, then you try to make your environment as much Japanese as possible. You watch Japanese TV, you read Japanese books, you go to Japanese restaurants, try to order in Japanese, you start hanging out with Japanese people, you take online Japanese classes, you watch Japanese YouTube channels. Like you try to be around it as much as possible. And for too many of us, we're not doing as much. Are you consistent in watching espresso videos every morning? I make them every morning for you, but you're probably not watching them every morning. Are you consistent in your other habits and your other routines, in the books that you're reading, in the content you're consuming? Like, are you consistent enough? And that's usually the problem, is that you have these moments where you're bold and you're ambitious and like, I'm tired of this life and I want to do better and this is the day. And so you have the energy and motivation and you go off and do the thing. But then tomorrow you wake up and it's just not there anymore and you don't stay consistent on the habit. And the only difference between the people who've had tons of success and where you're at right now is that they just kept doing it. They just stayed consistent on the habit. And so if you look at reading as an example, I used to read a ton before YouTube came out, before videos. I'm a visual learner. I'd much rather watch something than read it. But there was no YouTube. There were no real videos to learn from. So I started with books. And now I've come back to books a little bit where I'm trying to read 10 pages a day. So the goal is 10 pages a day. And I've been 95% consistent on hitting 10 pages a day. And I also like to read 7 to 10 books at a time. And people think that that's crazy. Why 7 to 10 books at a time? Let me tell you why, and you can see if that's a fit for you or not. I think a book represents an idea. when you're reading a book, you step into somebody else's world, you step into somebody else's skin, you start to think like them. This is the point. If you're reading somebody's book, you start to think like them. If you're watching somebody's video, you start to think like them. That's why that habit is so important, because the more you're around it, you'll start to think like the people you want to be like, as opposed to thinking like the people who you're around right now. If you're around negative people, you start to think more negatively, right? You don't want that. You don't want to be the toxic person. And so when you're reading somebody's book or watching a video, you start to think like them. What I found was I would read one book at a time, and I would start to think like them, and then I would move on to the next book and then start to think like this other person, and then forgot about the first person that I really liked. You could be into the book, you could love it, like, wow, what a great book. And then as soon as you put it down because you're done and you pick up another book, it starts to fade. The half-life is really short. And reading the same book over and over and over again just loses its impact. Maybe you can read it once a year, but if you just pick up the same book and then read it on repeat, it loses its impact. Just like watching the same video loses its impact if you watch it every single day, every single day, every single day. So what I wanted to do was microdose on books. And it was an experiment, so I don't know if it's gonna work, but I tried it and I really liked it. So I microdose in that I take 10 pages a day, and it's usually between 10 and 20, mostly depending on where the chapter ends, so it's at least 10. So if a chapter ends at page 9, then I'm reading another chapter. So at least 10, and usually in the 10 to 20 page category. And I'll read 7 to 10 books at a time. And as I'm going through it, what I find is that how long that person's vibe lasts is much longer. So if I'm reading Jamie Kern-Lima's book, Believe It, great book if you haven't checked it out yet. She went from being a waitress to being selling her company for $1.3 billion in cash, not shares, not equity, cash. Crazy deal, amazing woman, great success story if you haven't heard of her yet. Jamie Kern-Lima. So as I'm reading her book, it's about believe, so it's already great. But she has a different way of seeing it, and she has just such a raw, vulnerable energy of sharing all of her weaknesses and insecurities. And as I'm reading the book, I feel like her, and I feel like I want to share more and dive deeper into my story. And she's exposing a part of me that I haven't discovered enough of, right? That's what a good book does, or a good video does. And so now I'm reading her book every 7 to 10 days, because I'm reading 7 to 10 books at a time. And what I find is I get a little bit of Jamie. If you get Jamie, once a week you get Jamie, once a week you get Jamie. It's that little bit of a reminder of the person that you want to be. Now, I don't want to be Jamie, but there's pieces of Jamie that will make me better. And I need that reminder, because I could call Jamie and ask her for advice, but I'm not hopping on a weekly call with Jamie. So I get that from the book. I like the variety of having a lot of different books on the go at a time. Not in one sitting, like one sitting is just one book at a time. I like looking forward to, like, oh, I'm gonna read that next week again. So I look forward to when it's coming up. But I think the biggest benefit of reading so many books at a time is just that you carry the feeling with you for a longer period of time. Not even so much the tactics and the strategies in any good book, personal development book especially, but the vibe, the mindset, the feeling that person is. Because again, when you read somebody's book, you get engrossed, you become them almost. You start to think and feel like them, and you want that to last, but it doesn't last. So how do you make it last? You stretch out the book for longer periods of time. Anyway, it's a little hack that I do that is worth a shot. Give it a shot. Give yourself a small goal. 5 pages a day, 10 pages a day, 20 pages a day. It doesn't have to be sitting down and finishing a book a day, right? The people who can speed read and read a book a day, that's crazy. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. But 10 pages a day is doable. And 10 pages a day to step into somebody's world who you respect, who you want to learn something from. If you did that consistently, it'll start to change your life. If you watch videos like this, it'll start to change your life, but consistently, not the one-off, consistently. Are you 95% consistent on the things that will help take you to where you want to be? That's the only thing that's missing. You got the heart, you got the compassion, you got the desire to serve, you've got a big mission inside you, you want to do good, you deserve to make more money. It's all of it, it's all there. It's just not enough consistency in the pushing forward to the life that you could have. The consistency in being around the people who force you in a loving way to do more, to think more, to be more of you. If you can make that change, even just for the next quarter, for the next 90 days, that every day you read 10 pages of a book that inspires you, or every day for 90 days you watch an espresso video or somebody else's channel that inspires you, it'll change your life. And it'll start to set you up for the habits you need for success. Everybody knows the importance of mentors. Most of us don't have the right mentors in our life. And with videos and books, you have access to the top minds on the planet, to the most inspiring people in the world. And if you're hanging around them on a daily basis, you'll be a totally different person, a better you, still you, but better. More proud of yourself, having a bigger impact, and making the money that you deserve for yourself, your family, and your community. Now I've got a special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy, but before that, it's time for the question of the day. I wanna know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you watch a video and just get motivated, the science says you have a 35% chance of actually following through on your goals. That's not good enough. No, not for you, Believe Nation, we gotta do something. But when you write it down and you create a specific plan of action for the next week, that number jumps to 91% chance of you following through. And when you commit to somebody else, like leaving a comment on this video, it jumps to 95%. You need to follow through on your goals. So what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your specific plan of action for the next week? Put it down in the comments below so I can celebrate you. Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, the science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action for you to shift that habit forward. So I've designed a special free program to help you get more self-belief for every day. For 254 days, I will send you an email to an unlisted video that, if you watch it, will shift your confidence forward. The links to join for free are in the description below.
You really have to believe the internet's going to be mainstream. A lot of people are going to get out there and use it. When you have the level of success that we've had, when you have a business that's important as this with this many competitors, you're going to have people saying some nasty things. If you ask people across the United States, is the future going to be better than the past? Most say no. Certainly during the time I was at Harvard, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. The idea that software was this field that the opportunity was unbelievable. That became more obvious during the 3-year period I was here. But my dad had been a lawyer. I thought of mathematics, like doing well in the Putnam. That was the coolest thing. And the computer software, I didn't think those people were as smart as the math people. So it's like, well, am I going to go into the easy field or this really hard field? But anyway, math was fantastic. When I finally picked and decided to go do Microsoft, then I got into a period from age 19 to about 40 where I wasn't able to look at the latest on how tornadoes work or how mitochondria work. I was pretty monomaniacal. And when I was able to ask Steve, this is the year 2000, Steve Ballmer, he mistakenly graduated, but then he started at well, I was trying to hire him, but his parents told him you're supposed to graduate, which was fine. But then he started at Stanford Business School, and he was in his first year, and I thought, oh, this is perfect. I'll get him to drop out of Stanford Business School. So in a certain sense, he is a dropout. And he was very key to the success of Microsoft. I mean, he knew a lot of things. But during that period, I didn't get to do much. At Harvard, I took all these courses because it was just so amazing that people were interested in talking about them. And I have to say, I never went to a lecture during reading period or anything because the courses that I was actually signed up for, I finally started to work on those. So I was in Hillel the minute it would open to the minute it would close during reading period, trying to catch up on that other set of courses. So people say I'm a dropout, which is literally true, but because I like college courses, the online college courses, there's a company called The Learning Company that I buy tons and tons of their stuff, and I do at least 4 or 5 courses a year. In a sense, I like going to college more than anyone. So I've sort of made sure my job, certainly post-Microsoft, that I get to spend my time meeting with scientists, learning new things, seeing what the hard problems are, in some cases giving money to people to take on those very, very hard problems. We also are big believers in United Way and what goes on there, and that's more at a business level. We sort of think every business ought to do that as a basic thing, because social services, we think, deserve particular priority in terms of drawing employees in to help the community. And there's ways to take those fundraising things within a company and have contests and comparisons and great stories, get the word out, make it fun, make it easy. It's just a piece of email. The easiest thing to do is click and say you want to give your fair share, and then we send you no more email. So we've made it the easiest thing to do is participate. In terms of individuals, it's quite different. You can take and give to groups like United Way, who are really thinking about everything in the community, or you can find things, and most people mix this, you can find things that you're particularly interested in, that you know about, that a relative benefited from, or that you want to go and volunteer. And Microsoft does a thing now. For every hour that somebody volunteers, we actually make a grant to that organization, because that says that they care about it and they think it's doing very good work. Now, for individuals at some levels, probably most of your giving is going to be in the community where you know what's going on. I'm a big believer that some of the greatest inequities are on a global basis. And so one of the things our foundation tries to get out is the names of a number of organizations like Save the Children or Global Fund or Vaccine Fund that we know are taking dollars in a very efficient way and saving lives and improving conditions. And I would hope that as people are able to be fairly generous, that this international component, that it be part of what they're doing. Obviously, if you get up to enough scale, then you can take on big projects. And I will get a chance with some of my extra time to go out and share with people who are lucky enough to have wealth, just tell them how much fun I'm having and that it can have impact, and hopefully encourage it. I think when Warren Buffett gave his gift, it sent a message to people that, wow, this is the right thing to do, and he doesn't like to waste money. So a sense that there are causes out there that you can make a big difference. Well, I think having some self-confidence is different than finding your passion. From a young age, ideally you'll have adults in your life, preferably your parents as part of that, some of your teachers, people around you who like you and they're behind you and they'll back you no matter what goes on. And that gives you enough confidence to go off on a quest. And during that quest, you try different things out. If you're lucky, when you're very young, you find something you're passionate about. I did when I was 13 years old. I found computers and software. It took me another 5 years to figure out that was my life's primary work. But that's a lucky thing. Other people, get out into their 20s or even later before they find what they're passionate about. But proceeding with a certain set of self-confidence, that there are people who care for you, you care for them, that you succeed in their eyes by your how you treat them. I think that's pretty basic, and it gives you the platform on which to try out new things, to fail. At first you're not going to succeed in various things. So self-confidence is primary, and then finding your passion is an adventure, a quest that may take time, and it may switch over the time of your life. But those deep relationships will let you pursue it with vigor. I think that this is a deep problem in perception. Is that if you want something to improve, you have a tendency to be bothered by the status quo, and to think that it's much worse than it is. And that can be beneficial because you don't like, say, the level of violence in the world, the level of poverty, the level of number of kids dying. But if you divorce yourself from the true facts of improvement and look at the exemplars, look at what's worked, if you get sort of a general despair about is the world improving, then you won't latch on to those examples. The Steven Pinker example, one of my favorite books of all time, is that if you ask people, is this one of the most violent eras in history, they will say yes. So overwhelming Americans say yes. Well, it's overwhelmingly the least violent era in history. And so what it means is your disgust at violence actually increases, and that's partly why we take steps and why within our own society and the world at large it's come down so dramatically. If you ask people across the United States, is the future going to be better than the past? Most say no. My kids will be worse off than I am. They think innovation won't make the world better for them or their children. So who's right? The people who say innovation will create new possibilities and make the world better? Or the people who see a trend toward inequality and a decline in opportunity and don't think innovation will change that? The pessimists are wrong, in my view, but they're not crazy. If innovation is purely market-driven and we don't focus on the big inequities, then we could have amazing advances and inventions that leave the world even more divided. We won't improve public schools. We won't cure malaria. We won't end poverty. We won't develop the innovations poor farmers need to grow food in a changing climate. If our optimism doesn't address the problems that affect so many of our fellow human beings, then our optimism needs more empathy. If empathy channels our optimism, we will see the poverty and the disease and the poor schools. We will answer with our innovations, and we will surprise the pessimists. Over the next generation, you Stanford graduates will lead a new wave of innovation. Which problems will you decide to solve? If your world is wide, you can create the future we all want. If your world is narrow, you may create the future the pessimists fear. I started learning in Soweto that if we're going to make our optimism matter to everyone and empower people everywhere, we have to see the lives of those most in need. If we have optimism without empathy, then it doesn't matter how much we master the secrets of science. We're not really solving problems, we're just working on puzzles. I think most of you have a broader worldview than I had at your age. You can do better at this than I did. If you put your hearts and minds to it, you can surprise the pessimists. We're eager to see it. Education is essentially a social construct. It's not that the universities have secret knowledge that only they have available. I took, these numbers won't make any sense anymore, but the hardest freshman math class was called Math 55. I assume it's not called that anymore, but it was a group of eight. It was a group of 80 people whose personal positioning was they were the best person at math that they had ever met. So there were 79 frauds. One person who really was the best at math. The guy who came in first in the class is a lawyer in New York now. The guy who came in second is a professor of chaos theory at Princeton. And then I came in third. So I knew, okay, math, geez, that's interesting. Anyway, I didn't take physics 55, but I read the Feynman book. And so if you're motivated, seriously, you don't have to take a course. The Feynman book, if you're hardcore, just read the Feynman book, do the problems. You want to learn to do software? Read The Art of Computer Programming. Good luck doing the problems, but anyone that's rated 30 or harder is like super hard to do. And so a MOOC, in a sense, doesn't change what counts.
it's always been in the textbook, but the percentage of students who just buy textbooks and read them and know the subject is vanishingly small. You kind of have to have this thing where a bunch of kids all come at the same time, and if you don't study, you're going to get a bad grade, and your parents may not like that. You have to create all these social things in order for people to get into this mode of hyper-concentrating and actually understanding, why should I concentrate? If I'm a high school student, they put X's and Y's up on the board. How does that relate to my life? Now, if you understood that being good at math lets you get a good job, travel the world, you might say, okay, it does relate to me, but that's a very indirect thing, and the kind of discipline to care about that, to concentrate, that's what's missing. And so MOOCs, to the degree that it's easier to take a MOOC than it is to read a textbook, yeah, that's nice. It's a little bit interactive, there's a video. That's partly why I like the Learning Company, like all their economics. There's a guy named Timothy Taylor who has 5 courses on economics I super recommend. And you learn to like him and his way of explaining things. So a MOOC is a slightly more digestible form of learning, but it doesn't take, particularly for somebody at a young age, it in no way changes this question of why should people engage in that learning, and how do you create the environment and the sense of achievement and the sense of capability that sitting in there and looking at X's and Y's and manipulating them seems like a smart thing to do.
I think you can worship and mythologize the idea of working extremely hard. For my particular makeup, I mean, it really is true that I didn't believe in weekends, I didn't believe in vacations. I mean, I knew everybody's license plate, so I could tell you over the last month when their car had come and gone from the parking lot. So I don't recommend it. I don't think most people would enjoy it. Once I got into my 30s, I could hardly even imagine how I had done that. Because by then some natural behavior kicked in, and I loved weekends, and my girlfriend liked vacations, and that turned out to be kind of a neat thing. Now I take lots of vacations. I mean, my 20-year-old self is so disgusted with my current self. I was sure I would never do anything but ride and coach. Now I have a plane. So it's very much counter-revelations have taken place at high speed. But yes, it is nice if during those first several years, if you have a team that's chosen to be pretty maniacal about the company. And how far that goes, you should have a mutual understanding, so you're not one person expecting one thing, another person expecting another thing. And you'll have individuals who have, health or relatives or things that are distracted. But yes, I have a fairly hardcore view that there should be a very large sacrifice made during those early years. We should always measure the good impacts and the bad impacts of the stuff we have. Certainly, whenever a new technology comes along, there's a lot of fear about what it's going to do. When the printing press came along, there was a great fear that people would just read books and not go out and seek, real experiences. And I tried that when I was that kid, just reading books, and maybe I'd be more rounded if there hadn't been books around. So I think it's hard. I haven't seen any evidence of any significance that socialization is really broken down in some bad way. I know that, with Skype now, I meet my daughter's boyfriend's parents when I walk into her bedroom, and there they are on Skype. So socialization is changing, but I'm not sure you can really say that there's a negative vector there. And there's so many positive vectors about if you're curious and you want to learn something. I was young and I'd ask a question about, hey, what's fertilizer? If the World Book didn't have it, I wasn't going to get the answer. Now, of course, you can go online, watch videos, and my children are always asking questions where if I don't know the answer, we just go, and it's actually kind of fun to learn it together. So I'd say on balance, I think we're quite far ahead. There are some things about privacy maybe overuse of pornography, letting your kids play too many video games, so you have to set a quota, just like I had to have a quota for how much I was allowed to read. But I think overwhelmingly, we've got mostly positive things, including the opportunity ahead of us of how the tool gets used in mainstream education. I would say most of the opportunity to make computers improve work is in front of us instead of behind us. Only at kind of a very mechanical level of it's better than whiteout. Are we like, oh wow, this thing helps me get my work done? For extremely structured tasks like creating financial statements, where the application logic is very opaque and you're just led through it, or for very horizontal things where you really understand what you're up to and the machine doesn't see, oh, that email's part of personnel review, that email's part of planning the Salesforce meeting. So we have kind of the low-level horizontal, which in this way is amazing. And then we have this very structured applications world. The idea of matching what you in your head have as the intention of the overall activity and the semantics around it, and therefore sort of maximally helping you with those things. I think now that a lot of base level things are done very well, including gathering the data and learning from it, that we should be able to have what the machine thinks you're up to and what you think you're up to match each other and improve the productivity quality quite dramatically. But it's taken a long time to get to this point. You really have to believe the internet's going to be mainstream. A lot of people are going to get out there and use it, and that they're going to be willing to pay for some content.
Is that the operating idea that you have?
Well, each of these businesses is an entrepreneurial business. The overreaching theme is that, yes, I believe in the internet. I believe it'll get increasingly popular, and we're doing some neat new things to take advantage of that.
You've got a lot of cash on hand, yes?
Right.
All right. It puts you in an enviable position. You can experiment with a lot of entrepreneurial ideas and see what sticks and what flies.
Well, we're in business to make money.
But the other thing is providing such a cash flow for you.
Well, it all belongs to the shareholders.
Yeah.
We're not dilettantes.
No, I know.
We are business people. And it is true that if you find an idea that requires 3 or 4 years of improvement and patience and really sticking with it, that we're very good at that. Take Windows, which we bet our company on. Everybody doubted that would succeed. IBM did not support us in that. It took longer than we expected, over 4 years before finally graphical interface got popular, and now people take it for granted. It's part of every personal computer, and you just expect it to be there. That was one of the grand successes of the company. In the same way, we're betting on the internet, that our tools there will be popular, and that a few of these content plays that we've decided to get involved in, that the scale and the users will make those into great businesses.
You went to Harvard and you dropped out. Have you ever thought how your life could be better off if you had gotten your Harvard degree?
Well, I'm a weird dropout because I take college courses all the time. I love learning company courses and things, so I loved being a student. And there were smart people around, and they fed you, and they gave you these nice grades that made you feel smart. So I feel it was unfortunate that I didn't get to stay there, but I don't think I missed any knowledge because whatever I needed to learn, I was still in a learning mode. Well, I think throughout our history, we wake up every day knowing that in the business of technology, you have to think about what are you missing? What is the research or customer feedback that you should be paying more attention to? And how do you keep that pace of innovation very, very high? How do you make sure you're hiring the very best people? And that kind of focus has helped drive us forward through all the milestones the company has had. Certainly the internet is a great example of that. We had to tear up our plans and step back and say, well, how do we really embrace all that's good about the internet and recognize some of the shortcomings and make sure we're leading the way in reducing what what has held people away from the internet.
The key thing was that Paul, Alan, and I had loved working on software since we were lucky enough to be exposed. Literally, I was 13 in 8th grade when this time-sharing terminal came in, and we just did it day and night and got better. And we could see that the magic of software combined with this miracle of the microprocessor, subject to Moore's law, exponential improvement, that was a magic combination. And we'd look around and say, hey, how come everybody's not saying this is amazing? I mean, we're going to dethrone IBM, and why doesn't Digital Equipment get it? Why is the guy who runs it, this is a company that's long gone, but dominated many computers at the time, why isn't that guy up there saying it's wrong? We know it's right. And so the key event for us was, it was a very cold Boston winter, and a kit computer came out on this Popular Electronics magazine, and we said, oh, damn, this is happening without us. I mean, here we are doing nothing. And so we called the company up and said, hey, we're ready. And then we called them back. We actually did the work, and then we called them back and said, how do you make the stuff go in and out of the computer, the I/O? And they said, well, that's interesting. Nobody else has ever asked that. You must really be doing something. So that was, anyway, our very first customer. And so we grabbed onto it to be the very first. And we were the first to say there should be a software industry and come and do it. In a sense, it was one of the lower risk things I've ever done in my life because, I could have always gone back. Well, my dad didn't say, hey, if you go away for a few years, I'll stop paying for your education. They were nice and said, okay, go, learn your lesson down there in the desert, and then you get back to the serious stuff, and we're still waiting. When you have a tragedy like this pandemic, there is always the possibility you're going to narrow your community that you care about. You're going to think about yourself or your family, not the whole country, including those who've been somewhat left behind. Likewise, there's a risk looking at Africa and other developing countries and saying, no, we need to help them out because difficulties there of not enough food are really extreme, and small amounts of the budget, less than 1%, can help them out. Likewise, you don't want to just think about the here and now, you also want to think about the future. After all, the government failed us by not anticipating this pandemic. There were voices like mine in TED Talk and other venues that kind of said, hey, get ready. We don't know when, but it's coming. Sadly, that didn't happen. Another thing we trust government to get us ready for is climate change. That's coming, and it won't be as easy as creating a vaccine to solve it. And so right now, in terms of people's sympathy being broad, being willing to address other problems even though they're not here right now, I am actually seeing a lot of positive voices. People saying, make sure the recovery is a green recovery. Europe has done a lot on that. And so, and actually the dialogue in politics about, does climate change matter is stronger today than it's ever been. So this closing in and only worrying about the short term, I'm not seeing that. Of course, your audience, which is very young, will be the key to saying, let's not just look at this short term. Let's start the investments that deal with inequities. Let's start the investments that can make sure climate change doesn't come in and have even more tragic results than this pandemic does. Young people thinking about policies, getting involved, I think I'm seeing an uptick. I hope that's sustained because they're the ones who will really do the innovative work.
If you were 20 years old today and you wanted to start a new company, drop out of Harvard, what company or what area would you want to start it in?
Well, this is a great time to be doing innovation because the tools of innovation are so much better. There are lots of things in biology that are very interesting. There are lots of things in energy that are interesting. Given my background, I would start an AI company that whose goal would be to teach computers how to read so that they can absorb and understand all the written knowledge of the world. That's an area where AI has yet to make progress, and it will be quite profound when we achieve that goal. I decided to focus more on giving away than making money, and so I've gotten a chance to travel the world, be out in Africa and Asia quite a bit, and see the needs that are out there. And now our foundation is very focused on global health, focused on agriculture because the majority of the very poor in the world are farmers who have very small plots of land. So any increase in productivity or certainty of their crop coming in can make a huge difference for them. And you might think of a career in software, selling to people who can afford personal computers, and now the career at the foundation is being very different. And certainly they're different in the sense that now it's about vaccines. Now a lot it's with various governments, the donor governments, the governments in import countries. But at its core, it's really basically the same thing, which is finding innovators, people who've got breakthrough ideas, be willing to back them, understand what they're working on, measure what they're coming up with, try and make sure that when it's delivered, it really has the impact it's supposed to be, and getting into a feedback loop driven by very precise measurement.
I feel like you always seem to swing for the fences in general. It's just sort of a new way of framing it. But I have to ask, if you are swinging for the fences, what if you miss?
Well, hopefully you get more than one swing.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
Either at the same problem, like multiple malaria vaccine constructs, so that if you have 2 or 3, the combined chance of success is much higher, or that you're working in multiple areas, not just one area.
Right.
In climate, for example, I have a company that's trying to make a nuclear reactor that would be very cheap and that would have safety so that the public would be very accepting of it.
Yeah.
Now, even I realize that's high risk, less than 50% chance all that comes together. And yet, if it did, and the only reason I'm involved is it would really help with climate, let us generate electricity without any greenhouse gases. Well, the digital revolution, internet, social media, all of that, in certain respects, it's made it easier for us to see what's going on. Medical researchers are publishing articles every day, and all over the world, people can immediately see what the new thinking is there. Tracking the disease statistics, I click on the Johns Hopkins website every morning and see, okay, which countries are having a tough time with cases or deaths. Thank God for the internet. Work at home, our ability to connect up with each other is driven by that. But it also has meant that a lot of very surprisingly interesting conspiracy theories that are false, sadly, they spread a lot faster than the truth. So the idea that did somebody intentionally cause this thing, completely false, even in some cases accusing me of having some connection, that can be dangerous because it means, your willingness to believe, is the vaccine something I should take? Should I wear masks? If you go for these simple but wrong theories, getting people to work together and protect each other so we can get out of this as soon as possible, that's really at risk. You raised the question of how should the government deal with that. It's very difficult. Ideally, citizens are just well informed and they know which publications are very careful about what they say, and we don't have to engage in censorship. But so much of the almost crazy false information is out there that looking at the companies like Facebook and saying, okay, what is their role in that? When somebody says masks don't work, which is wrong, or they say just take hydroxychloroquine and you'll be totally safe. What is their responsibility for catching those things, particularly when they get up to large numbers? That is being debated. And, I think we'll come out of this with those companies feeling a stronger sense of responsibility and actually understanding, having the public debate about how they need to help here.
Knowing that you're doing all this work, but someone in my position, I'm not a philanthropist, I don't necessarily have the means. How does someone like me or someone watching this help in the best way they can?
Well, I wish more people could actually get to these countries, join the Peace Corps, spend time, even just spending a few weeks there and see how great the needs are and see the progress. A lot of, volunteer work in the United States builds that sense of, okay, we care about other humans, even, beyond our own family group, even people who had very different experiences. So, at a young age, a little bit of giving money away, to form that habit and picking which things you really want to give to, including lots of things here in the US, and getting involved with volunteer time. Those are the people who I think will help kind of bring the world together and, avoid just this divisiveness that is my greatest concern. The idea that you could get people to decide to support this foreign aid thing, which is a big deal for our foundation, from a numeric point of view, we're still pushing that a little bit, but honestly, the story of the one child, you know, if you say to an audience, here's the picture of this child, shall we save this child? They're more engaged than if you said, hey, let's save 1 million children. You know, so there's definitely a sort of, you know, 10 to the 6th problem here somewhere.
Yeah, that's
that
fascinating.
Humans are not wired to do that on a numeric basis. And so, you know, that's why we have people like Bono and many others who come from a more storytelling world, and then they let me throw a few charts and numbers in, just because I think that should be there. Once your heart tells you what direction to go in, to prove that this is a very affordable, not a big deal, well-managed path to be on.
Your early days, you described yourself as a nightmare boss. Those are your words, not mine. Was your work ethic just very different to everybody else's?
I was fanatical in my 20s. Helping Microsoft lead the way in software was the only thing that I really focused on. So, you know, I worked weekends, I didn't believe in vacation, and so I really pushed people to work hard. Did you? And I was still learning how to manage people, particularly the different skill sets, the sales people, the accounting people. And so, you know, I fortunately, I think I'm a little bit better now. Yeah, it was fun when we got to know each other. We would be traveling around Lagos, where the traffic gives you lots of time to sit and talk sometimes. And, you know, I'd be showing Aliko my charts about, hey, Sokoto has a pretty low vaccination rate, you know, and Kano needs to do this. And Aliko, he really knows people. He has relationships. He's willing to reach out to people. So he'd say, hey, let's call the governor, you know, and we'll talk to him about this. And sure enough, you know, next thing you know, we've got the governor of Sokoto on the phone. We're talking about this. And so this ability now to reach out, to draw on the broad relationships that Aliko's developed. And, you know, I'm pretty shy about calling people. I just want to mail them my charts. But in fact, what's come out of that is that Aliko and I do a video conference call with 6 of the governors in the northern states, where twice a year we look at vaccine coverage. You know, is the supply chain working? Are the workers showing up? Are the healthcare posts in the right locations? And it's a big challenge, but really drawing on Aliko's communication skills and the fact that he's not afraid to call anyone. Everyone he wants to talk to him. It's been phenomenal. I get to, when I, you know, say, okay, we're going to build a TB drug team, we're going to build a TB vaccine team, we're going to build a, you know, kill all the mosquitoes in the world, gene drive CRISPR team. I get to, in terms of how we fund that, organize it, how many locations, do we wait till they have this result before we scale it up? I get to use the same, or 80% the same type of thinking that I exercised in terms of, okay, let's go do Windows, let's go do Excel. So it's backing engineers, it's getting a sense of the team, you know, what needs to be added to that team, or the IQs on the team adding up, as opposed to subtracting from each other. And it's very comfortable because the most intense period of Microsoft was where these teams were about size 30. And for our diseases, you know, typhoid, rotavirus, there's a lot of diseases that hopefully you'll never hear of again, most of which don't exist here in the US. But so it is very, very similar. It takes a decade generally from start to finish. The AIDS vaccine, actually, we're on year 14, and it'll probably be another 8 to 10 years before that one is completely done. So some take as long as 20 years because there's many dead ends, and you have kind of a portfolio of approaches. But yes, I feel like my working with governments, hiring smart people, managing teams, it did prepare me well for this very operational organization that's a lot like a business, except that our profit is lives saved as opposed to a monetary measure. Historically, the newspapers or the media were very responsible about not letting untruths about vaccine safety get out there. Now, it's, you don't want to get rid of the good thing, which is that anybody can publish.
Right.
The barriers to entry, the diversity of voices is so phenomenal compared to traditional publishing.
Right. I feel like, and you have a bit of a YouTube presence, so you're able to share information about things through social media. It's kind of a social media age, so I feel like that ideally helps your cause more than it hurts it.
Yeah, my audience probably isn't deep with the vaccine doubters.
Okay, fair, yeah.
But yeah, in a creative way, trying to get positive messages to be interesting, and we have work to do on that. I would have thought, using experts and scientific knowledge, that all the internet would just make it so much easier to learn about things, and yet in some ways, people aren't seeking out complex information, particularly if it disagrees with some preconceived notion that they have. So, how can social media get out there and be a little bit of a force for education, particularly on climate, where without a consensus, we won't do the hard things that will save things for the next generation.
Most people over the last 200 years or so, whoever the wealthiest person in the world was, didn't usually work that hard when they got to be 60 or so. They kind of took life easy. You seem to be working pretty hard. What motivates you to still work so hard?
Well, I love my work. The work of the foundation is super interesting. I get to meet with the scientists. I get to go out in the field. I do think your habits are sort of set in your 20s and 30s. And by my standards of the 20s, I didn't believe in weekends back then, not to mention vacations. So I'm, fairly lazy compared to myself in my 20s, where I was a true fanatic. All I believed in was working on software night and day, and for my 20s, that was perfect. I didn't have a wife or family at all, and my role was very hands-on role. There's no doubt that creating a board, having people like Dave Marquardt there who wasn't at the company, and we were so overwrought about, this is right, this is wrong, we messed this up, that having people have a little bit of distance come in and talk to us is good. For the last 30 years or so, I've gotten to be friends with Warren Buffett, and he's in Omaha. He's not in this tech world at all, and to him it's like, hey, how could you ever know which will rise and which will fall? I'm not going to put money until Apple sold at a multiple of 12. Then he decided he could put $50 billion into that. After he asked all his friends, hey, if somebody had an iPhone that was half as expensive, would you switch away? Or is it more like jewelry where you really want to have an iPhone? And so he decided that those profit streams might not be eliminated anytime soon. Anyway, because he's not in this world, he has a definite way of looking at things, including this idea of how work should be fun. He has made his work so much fun that he works more hours than I do. He works 6 days a week at 88 years old. And he likes to say that he skips to work every day. He doesn't, but he says that.
It's a good visual.
When he was 83, he could still skip, but now he's gotten really, he can't do it. Having somebody like that, the toughest thing I went through was this antitrust lawsuit where, it didn't seem very predictable, and he was a great counsel during all of that stuff. So getting somebody who's successful in another domain, but yet kind of a business type mindset. Anyway, for me, that was a huge gift.
When you were starting Microsoft, there were a lot of other software companies, and you were not number one at the beginning. I think there were others who were a little bit further ahead. What was it that enabled you to beat everybody else up in the software business? Was it Bill Gates? Was it something else? What was the unique factor that made you the most successful?
Yeah, we were actually the first, but there were companies, and they were all kind of single product companies who got ahead of us in terms of sales. By about 1991, we did become the largest of all of them. We were an engineering company. We were about how you hire smart people and how you use tools to develop software broadly. We were global, and we weren't about a single product. So like, for example, WordPerfect was a word processor, somebody might remember. They did so well with that product that their gross sales rivaled ours when we were doing a broad set of products. As soon as graphics interface caught on, which was Windows that became mainstream in 1995, we became far larger than the other software companies. Now, subsequently, Google, Apple, Amazon have become also extremely successful. But in the 90s, we were the strongest by far. We think that progress can actually accelerate. The last 15 years have been wonderful, but the next 15, we can do more. And some people worry that when you talk about progress, that it'll reduce people's commitment to make things better. They think when you talk about progress that it shows you're naive and that maybe you don't realize all those things that are left to be done and how horrific they are. So sometimes purely that negative side of the story gets told, but you lose something very important if you only look at it that way. You lose the optimism about what's possible, and you lose the information where you look at the places that have done better than others, and you understand what is it about delivery, innovation, partnerships, caring, what has come together for the very best progress, and then spread that to the other places. That's what will help us drive at full speed. Urgency that I felt that if we didn't get Microsoft going right away, that somebody would do a great job building a software company, we won't have a chance. That probably ended up not being true, that I could have waited 2 or 3 years and the opportunity to do Microsoft still would be there. But anyway, I felt a sense of urgency. It's not like, I still get to take courses and learn things today, things like The Learning Company, and there's all sorts of great books. So it's not like I've missed some part of my education.
Right. When you dropped out, your father and mother said, "Are you sure you know what you want to do?" If one of your children dropped out of college to start a company, what would you say?
Well, I'd have to say yes, but the dropping out is not an irrevocable decision. If you try and start a company that doesn't go well, they always let you go back. Okay. And so if you don't have, kids that you need to support, it's a very low risk thing, particularly in the culture of the United States, where trying to start something and failing is not a black mark for the rest of your life. In Microsoft, my early partner was Paul Allen, and then Steve Ballmer was my partner. Now Melinda's, even a totally equal partner in all the foundation work we're doing. So she and I run it together. It was so fascinating. The relationships we were building, learning all this new stuff, to have somebody to brainstorm with about it, made it a lot more fun. Things like writing letters together, giving speeches together, we had to learn how to bring out the best of the both of us in doing those things. But yeah, it was always, clear we wanted to do it together. Then, as Microsoft was becoming super successful, the idea of, okay, what am I going to do with this money? I could spend a little bit on myself, and I could give some to kids and, make sure they got a good education, whatever. But as a percentage, even the maximum of those two outlets, became tiny. And so then it was, okay, what do philanthropists do? And studying Rockefeller and all sorts of people who've done all that stuff, I thought, oh, well, this is interesting.
are there research topics that aren't getting enough money? And that's where I started to learn about global health and realized that, like malaria, nobody was putting any money into malaria. The US Army historically had put money in because troops were exposed to malaria, but then they got these drugs, prophylactic drugs, like mefloquine, lariam, and so they didn't need to put any more money into it. And so our first 30 million, we became the biggest funder in a disease that kills 1 million children a year at that time. We're down to 400,000 now. So it was a progression, working with Paul Allen in high school, working with Steve Ballmer at Microsoft, then meeting and marrying Melinda. Each of those, were very, very important in getting my mind, shaping whatever abilities I have towards something worthwhile. Yeah, if you want to have impact, usually delegation's important. Although, individual contributors in terms of inventing a drug or a new approach to things, that's phenomenal. So when Microsoft first got started, I wrote most of the code, and everybody else's code I read and kind of rewrote. And that got us up to 10 people, and then I had to say to myself, okay, we're going to ship code that I didn't edit. And that was hard for me, but I kind of got over that. Then I still said, okay, I'm going to interview everyone, and I'm going to at least look at samples of their code. Well, that got us up to about 40 people. And that was at a point where I had sold way more software than we could write because everybody was so impressed. And I thought, well, I need to collect enough money to keep hiring all these people. But the demand was so high that we were actually falling behind. That's when I hired Steve. And Steve figured out, how to control what promises I made to people, and B, how to hire lots of people, and really good people, and create organizations and teams. So I delegated to Steve that, and he was constantly saying to me, okay, we're going to hire programmers that you've never met. And I'd say, no, we're not. And then he would show me numerically that the constraint wasn't going to work. Then I said, okay, then I would, know all the managers of the people. And so over time, and of course, I could say the quality per person was falling monotonically, according to me. But, large problems, if you want to, write the most popular office productivity software, that one person absolutely can't do that. You can write pretty code. So everyone has to decide what scale of organization they want to work in. Eventually, my role was very much as a leader and a reviewer of managers, but the top people, and I hired some super experienced people, I would make sure they were pursuing a common vision and they were well coordinated. But in terms of a lot of management stuff, they were way better than I was. Now I had to have the framework to know what mix of skills that we needed and when they were working well enough together. But a lot of my value added was picking, say, to do graphics user interface or to do an integrated office type thing, or to go global and not use agents to have Microsoft be present all over the world. And so, yeah, picking what you're good at and how you find the other people to fill in those things, that's super important. And most founders aren't able to scale that up and kind of give up the hands-on things that they used to get a lot of pleasure and comfort from.
If you want another amazing Bill Gates video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
Oh, we were so close. I was just too distracted. I screwed that up because of the distraction.
The key to a successful life is having an intentional life.